Hi, everybody. It's the show with Ron, and I'm Ron, and we're back to look at a little more news headlines. I was away for a while, but after the election, and I had my say on the election, and nobody watched my videos much. Uh, but I think over the last year, when we went up through the election process, I pegged many of the issues and ideas, the some of the skepticism about Harris that the media was blocking out. And if you want to look back at the last few videos, one of the lessons, I'll just reiterate it here, is that unfortunately we cannot trust the media. I would go so far as to say they were tricking us with analyzing the statistics for the election, the presidential election. And as I said in that video, in the last week, I looked at the stats and like, wow, all of those battleground states that were were neck and neck. Most of them, Trump was a little bit ahead, and as we know, the Republicans they pull a little below because the media has hurled such invective at people who supported Trump. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is too close to call. That's what I said. And it was funny because all the media, and certainly within social media, it was just a foregone conclusion that the clown Trump was going to be defeated handily by an appointed candidate, Kamala Harris. So anyway, I guess if you watch my videos in the election year, I was saying a lot of things other people were not saying, but now everybody's saying those things. So I'll move on from that, and it's a new day, a new world, a new news day. We got this guy, a photogenic person who shot that CEO allegedly, apparently, supposedly, in New York. And I think there's certainly, there's all of the, people sympathizing with this guy, hating on the insurance companies. And, what does this mean in the bigger world, which is what I've tried to talk about here? And there certainly is an undercurrent of anti establishment again in the country that maybe we haven't seen since the 60s. We have the anti Israel, even anti Jewish sentiment of a lot of people against the war that has been waged in response to the hostage taking in Israel by Hamas. And, here we have this guy who a lot of people sympathize with for shooting a CEO. But the interesting thing is that it seems like this anti-establishment feeling is falling on the side of the Republicans, and falling on the side of Trump. Certainly, we saw that in the election. That the rejection of Kamala Harris was probably down to a lot of things, but ultimately, people, when they're dissatisfied, when they have an anti-establishment feeling, they're not going to go with the incumbent government. So I think that's what we can take out of this CEO shooting. And it's strange because the Republicans historically have not been seen as an anti-establishment party, quite the opposite. But Trump has kind of turned the tables, and the Democrats have found themselves holding the bag of a lot of Republican policies, such as a lot of intervention in foreign wars, expensive foreign wars that reflect badly on the United States sometimes, the international trade agreements, all the Republicans pushed for, starting with Reagan. Clinton picked that up, and now the Democrats are seen to be the party of sending jobs overseas. So Democrats have seen the script flipped on them. And this really is what brought me back to YouTube, to talk about things. Syria. I'm an old foreign policy wonk, all the way back when I was a little kid in the 70s, trying to read and understand editorial cartoons and what was going on in the Middle East. Syria has been a constant in my lifetime. The Assad regime and its place in uh, being an irritant to the state of Israel, and then in latter days now being the ally to Shiite Iran in helping to stabilize that whole region. You know, it started with the Golan Heights, the little occupied territory that Israel has up there. And, you know, since then, you know, we have the funneling of arms to Hezbollah in Lebanon, the destabilization of Lebanon, which was, you know, formerly it was one of the most, in the 50s or 60s, one of the most stable countries in the Middle East, a Mediterranean paradise where European and American people would come to retire. And it's since been sort of like a buffet table that a lot of other big powers have been grabbing at, taking their piece of the pie, or staking their claim there. So for the Assad regime to fall to pieces is astonishing. And the biggest question, and I've tried to read all these articles about what's happening in Syria, nobody seems to quite know what's going on with who's taking it over, because there are former Al Qaeda. These would be Sunni radicals, so at least they hate Iran, but they may hate the rest of the liberal European democracies too. Who knows how close they're related to Al Qaeda, to ISIS, and like a lot of these former radicals that take over, they say they're moderate, but you never know in the end. Cuba's Castro was that way as well. And in the West, we always try to look on the bright side and try to be positive about these guys. But it's a revolution, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of government we end up with in Syria. And you see, we have both Israel and the United States have taken advantage of this vacuum of power where certainly the Syrian military was probably not carefully manning their air defenses, if at all, to do a lot of different strikes. So we have Israel hitting some of the assets of the Syrian government. I believe we had United States hit like 75 targets in Syria to knock out the chemical weapons factory. They didn't want the new government to get their hands on that. You know, here we have, here's your typical rebels. You never know. These are a lot of country boys who are coming in or who are propped up and paid for by other countries, supposedly Turkey. They're still tagged as terrorists by the United States, European Union. But again, a lot of that is theater. We really don't know if behind the scenes the United States is saying, okay, we have to say they're terrorists, but we're accepting this strategic decision to bring them in, and we just have to look the other way. And we're hoping that Turkey and their influence can moderate this new government. And I'm sure Turkey is saying, yeah, don't worry about it. We got this under control. But you never know. Because the guys driving into the capital, looting Assad's fleet of, is this it? Yeah. Somewhere there's an article about his whole big, his family, his whole big warehouse full of Ferraris and stuff like that. So this is a sort of stereotypical image that will be causing people to wonder and be concerned, and there's very little direction coming out of official governments about how they really feel about this. Officially, we say they're terrorists, but who knows what's going on behind the scenes between the United States and Turkey, the other powers. The good example, you know, remember those WikiLeaks cables? There was a lot of stuff in that where that demonstrated what's likely going on here, where, you know, like I was saying, the U.S. government has to say, well, yeah, technically we got our laws, we got our rules for regular public, and it says these guys are terrorists, so we got to peg them as terrorists, but We're going to work behind the scenes secretly with Turkey. Just don't say anything, everybody. This is what happens behind the scenes to facilitate things. Now, you could also guess that the United States, especially a government that's sort of hidebound, headed by a senile guy like Biden, might not have the appetite for another war like this because, the last time the United States dabbled in this area, that was in Iraq. And it unleashed a whole bunch of unforeseen circumstances, the whole ISIS situation. You took out a stable guy who you knew about who was controlling the country, Saddam Hussein, and it was just chaos. And it's chaos today. And it's chaos that it's allowed a bitter adversary of the West, Iran, to come in and infiltrate the religious, the political climate of Iraq. And that's still an irritant. So, and we contrast that. This is, I still feel kind of amazed at this time that Assad. This is the image of Assad. He's a guy. He looks like a Westerner. He's in a suit. He's not ranting and raving. He's not like eccentric character like a Muammar Gaddafi or like maybe a coarse country boy who's brutal, who like Saddam Hussein. However, the Assad regime may be one of the most brutal of all, but this image has endured, and certainly I'm sure it's protected him from some scrutiny. There was an article about, was it Vogue magazine, ran a glowing puff piece about his wife and how democratic and liberal she was, and they had to retract it. But it's just an interesting, he has this intellectual, learned image, as maybe his father even more so, and they've ruled it throughout my entire life. So it's an amazing change in the region to have this, to have him fall like this, apparently unexpectedly. See, in the media, they tell you it's unexpected. Again, behind the scenes, some decisions were made, and it would be hard to imagine Turkey making the decision to pull the pin on this operation, make it happen, set off the fireworks without the United States knowing, without it tacitly approving. Same with Israel. Supposedly Israel and Turkey are at loggerheads, at odds with a lot of things. The issues, Turkey is becoming more activist in resisting some of the overreach of Israel in the way it's conducted the retaliation against Hamas. But it would be hard to imagine that there would not be some sort of a tacit understanding about what's happening, perhaps even an approval. Of course, in the public, to normie people like us, they have to take their principled stance. But behind the scenes, decisions are being made about the future of the region. Again, these articles have very little content in them because there's very little information about the character of this new government that is going to be established here right on the doorstep of Israel, with which great repercussions for Lebanon as well. A lot of room for hope. But like I was saying, for Iraq, when you make a change, you never know what's going to happen. We made the change in Iraq. It was a big mess. Then Obama came in and he made a change in Libya, overthrew the Libyan government. And this was after the media spending years and years saying that because George W. Bush started expensive wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, he was a clown and a war criminal who's going to be brought before the Hague. Obama came in, did exactly the same thing. And it was arguably as big, if not bigger, a mess, and the mess still resonates there to this day. You don't hear about a lot of it in the media. U.S. media just doesn't report it because they've got a thing for Obama. They like him. He's held with kid gloves. And all of this, how George W. Bush did something and then Obama came in supposedly to be the opposite. He did the same thing. This is what leads people to believe that some mysterious deep state, uh, military industrial complex has an interest in fostering these expensive foreign wars where $100 billion at a time goes into military contractors to send weapons over there. This is what we heard after the election, where the Biden administration was trying to kind of ramp up the war with between Ukraine and Russia, perhaps supposedly to kind of lock in U.S. involvement and prevent Trump from closing things down. Probably some truth to that, but with a lot of these conspiracy theories, might be some truth to it, but there are probably some other mitigating, moderating factors. The world is so complex. It would be rare that just one little factor is factoring into it, like the desire for military contracts, fostering a war. There's a lot of factors that push onto those decisions. All this stuff, Jay-Z, more accusations. I don't know. Work it out in court. It's something that I don't know. I don't care about the celebrity trials and tribulations. Got mystery drones always in the news. Social media age limit. This is. I think I come down on this position as it being a very troubling position. Australia has passed something like this. And while it does make sense that perhaps TikTok and a lot of exposure to this social media is rotting the minds of the youth, making them foolish, making them facile, making them shallow, making them prone to conspiracy theorists. The way, if you put these into place, apparently, as I understand it, Australia, everybody is going to have to register their age to be able to log on to the internet. Now, this creates a system where other people of other ages or for other reasons might be blocked from the internet. So what that means is there's some logical things, like some guy is doing something with something he's not supposed to mess with online about images of certain people. So he's arrested, and they say, well, while you're not allowed to use the internet anymore, or you're not allowed to search these sites. So the government can add that in so that person can't log on. So you started this thing where the government can finally stop people from accessing the internet. Maybe people don't have the right opinions about something. They're writing something that they don't want government people don't accept. Maybe they're making fun of people that the government doesn't accept. It does allow. What if you don't pay your taxes or something? Governments in the U.S. are very creative in, if you don't pay your child support, you can't drive. They take your license. It gives governments a way to stop people from engaging on the internet. So this is it's a very scary thing, and I probably is not a good idea on balance. Okay, so we've got this. A lot of people were expecting that there might be efforts or a desire for a recession now or a collapse, because so many people had invested in if not in Kamala Harris, but then in the idea that Trump needs to be stopped at any cost, and that everything he says is the most disastrous thing. So we already have the situation where there's almost an irrational exuberance, to use the old quote, of people investing in bringing money back to the United States, investing in crypto, driving those to all-time highs. Other people saying that this probably could be the top of the market. And we have people again saying, well, if you don't allow illegal immigrants in the country, the whole economy will collapse. If you have tax cuts, the economy will collapse. If you stop spending, adding $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we'll have recession. And one of the problems is this huge expansion of the deficit, or the national debt from like 500, 600 million when Clinton left office. Clinton balanced the budget was zero, and the national debt was like 600 million. Since then, it's gone up to at least, I think, 35 trillion. They're adding, this has gone through the presidencies of George W. Bush and Obama and the first Trump presidency and the Biden presidency, where this spending to try to prevent recessions or downturns in the economy, which are natural things to have, which are corrections in the economy. I would say you have it about every 10 years towards the end of the decade, and we just skipped that in the last decade with just more and more spending. And I would say, again, when you talk about this, I'm not an economist, but when you look at the economy, it's almost like a religion for some people, but the goal is not to prevent a recession at all costs. That's a politician's goal. It's not a practical goal. So there may be some of the things that Trump proposes that would be necessary for the economy, but not exactly good for it. Whether he's too chaotic a person to really make these happen and to get his message out to the public through a media that opposes him almost openly, that's another question. Here's good old China making our science fiction nightmares a reality. We've got a altering spherical RoboCop to chase down, bludgeon, and catch criminals using net-launching cannons. That almost seems like a good idea to me. You can just deploy these in America's cities, and just as long as they have a little video for the entertaining recording of what's going on so I can watch it on YouTube later. The cop ball. You remember? Any Isaac Asimov fans out there? Remember Asimov, who had the 3 laws of robotics, which supposedly would prevent this, that somehow the conceptualization of robots in the 50s and 60s is that there would have to be some kind of logic program to allow autonomous actions by robots. But and his 3 laws were that they were a hierarchy of laws in which a robot couldn't cause or through an act of omission cause to harm to people, etc. And this would be the only way you could program the autonomous acting robots. But that it hasn't turned out to be the case. We can put guns on a robot and just have them shoot people autonomously, and apparently here with the cop ball, throw nets on people. So we can expect to see these in the next big protests in China, I suppose. We've got a new disease. The media is always good in keeping us up on this sort of stuff. Disease X. Hundreds of people dying. I think sometimes these things are always happening. The media is just more aware of it, considering what we went through with the past pandemic. Let's hope this doesn't get out again. What else do we have? And another great thing that the media, this is obviously the sensational, the UK thing, The Sun, although this is the US edition. They keep us up on all these things that worry us, the great clickbait stuff. Besides disease X, we've got mutant Chernobyl hounds who are rapidly evolving, I guess, into super dogs. He looks like a nice boy, but apparently he's a ravenous super dog. They're coming at you. Thank you for the media for alerting us to that important story. And let's see the list of the most dangerous countries. Here they are, the map. See, this is in here. Here we have this crescent of coups, part of the destabilization that followed the U.S. toppling of the Libyan government. And it's also probably a reaction to the French post-colonial domination of the economies of a lot of these countries that have to do their banking through France. And then we have this whole, I guess this was the old Fertile Crescent from Israel all the way through over into Pakistan, still one of the crossroads of the world and a dangerous area. Of course, we have Ukraine. We have like Papua New Guinea, which is apparently still a nightmare. We have some of these destabilized countries that have destabilized themselves, like Venezuela. And we have south of our border, we have Mexico, which is fighting, much like the U.S. did in the 20s, to knock out the organized crime. In the 1920s, we had, in our big cities, we had efforts to really go against the institutionalized corruption in the police force in our big cities. Mexico is doing something similar, and they're getting pushback, just like they did in the United States. So we should support them in helping them address these issues. So I think that's about it. I'm glad to be back. I hope someone will watch my videos. I'm going to test and see if I can promote any of these. I couldn't in the whole last year because I got the word directly from YouTube. If we mention Biden, if you mention Trump in it, it can't be promoted. And that was before Kamala Harris was appointed as the candidate. So I assumed hers was the same way. So I think the intent of this, talking about the news, is to kind of understand, relax a little bit, not get ourselves worked up into march into somebody else's parade. So that's what it's all about. And I'll see you next time, and we'll talk about more news items, context and commentary. See ya. Bye.